Good night, everyone. I want to welcome you to this very special session we're having here on the CNFO Leadership Institute. We have, for the first time, so many people from the Virgin Islands participating because we have a project that we're collaborating with other partners to do these modules. We have 4 of them, and tonight is the first one. Thank you for joining. Mitch, over to you if you're seeing the screen.
Yes, I'm seeing the screen. Good night, everyone. I also want to welcome you to this activity, which is about looking at capacity building in fisheries evidence networks and management in the Virgin Islands, and specifically focusing on Fisherfolk Organisation and the possibility of promoting the development of a network Fisherfolk Organisation in the Virgin Islands. So I want to welcome you to this session, and it is hosted by the CNFO with the kind collaboration that we have with CANARI, who is the substantive implementer of implementing agency for this particular project. So I want to thank the fisherfolk that are here from the Virgin Islands, and I want to thank Melanie for being here as well. And of course, without Nadine, we probably would not be here. Yes, so thanks to everyone. So first, I'm going to just share a video of my face, just so that you know who is speaking to you, and then I'll take out the video for the rest of the presentation. And introduce myself as well. So my name is Mitchell Lay from Antigua and Barbuda, and I am a fisherman. That's what I do for a living, but I also am the program coordinator for the Caribbean Network of Fisherfolk Organizations. And I'll be the one who will be facilitating the presentation tonight. So we have 4 modules that we intend to share with you over the next 2 weeks, this week and next week. And all 4 modules are designed to focus on those things that are, well, some of the things that are critical in considering both the formation and the operation of a fisherfolk organization. So we're sharing the knowledge that we have and some of the things that we have practiced to promote you having a successful attempt at forming a network of fisherfolk organizations. I want to say before I start the presentation for tonight that it's like 4 modules over the next 2 weeks. The first module tonight is about group process for registering an organization. And why I particularly titled this group process is because before you have a formal organization, you have a group of people, which is 1 or 2 or more persons, who decide that, hey, we have an issue and we'd like to have some sort of collective action on that issue. And then you want to move to another level of having an organization that is dedicated to dealing with issues like that or that particular issue, if it's a continuing issue. So that is the first module that we'll have, which is tonight. So that is group process for launching or registering an organization. And then on Thursday, we will have another session, the second of 4. And on Thursday, we're going to look at organizational issues. So we start to move from the process to how an organization itself operates. Yes. So on Thursday, we will look at organization structure and operation. So that this week, Thursday at 6:30 p.m. And then on the 28th, next week, Tuesday, we look at financial operations within a fisherfolk organization. And then the final module on the 30th of March, that is next Thursday, will be effective leadership in fisherfolk organizations. So that I just wanted to introduce the whole suite of topics before we get into this one, so we have an idea of where we're going for the next 2 weeks. So tonight, as I indicated earlier, we're looking at the module that is on your screen at the moment, and that is practical steps prior to formal launch or registration of an organization as part of the group process. So within the group process, I've identified several steps that I think are important for you to consider. And what I would like you to note in this presentation and the following presentations that we will make, the presentations following this, that we've designed the presentations to be very practical presentations, not academic at all, but practical and oriented to you being able, after this presentation, to engage in an appropriate manner to achieve, first, the objective of agreeing on an organization, and then moving to the other areas of operation, leadership, things like that. So they're very practical, not academic. So some of the things that we will share, you will not find on Google, but we have them because we have practical experience in this matter. So I wanted to make that very clear upfront. Yes, a lot of this is based on the CNFO's experience and involves a blend of those things that you can learn from formal training and those things that we have learned from practical application in the field. So there are 5 areas that I want to touch on tonight, and they're all geared towards the processes that are required for groups before they actually formally launch or formally register an organization. And I've used those 2 terms because an organization does not have to be a formally registered organization. An organization can be an informal entity as well. Yes, so that is why I use the phrase either formal launch or formal registration. So the 5 areas that I think we want to touch on tonight, and hopefully we can get through on these, is we want to look at what is the group thinking and how the group is going to approach agreeing on the purpose, goals, and objectives of the group. And I specifically did not include a lot of details on vision and mission as yet. They included implicitly, but we want to focus on those simpler things that are important right now, from which your vision and mission will spring almost automatically. So we are going to pay some attention to purpose, goals, and objectives. And purpose, goals, and objectives are about why you exist and what you want to do now that you exist. And then I want to touch a little bit on the identification of who are the people who are involved now and who are the people who can be involved, in terms of the people who are already on the ground working on this group issue, but also the people who can make a viable contribution who are not involved as yet. So identification of current and potential members of the group. And I think that is important for the group to always bear in mind, that the profile of the membership is important to have in mind so you can target the membership and also weed out those who are not suited for membership. And this is quite important in any organization. And then we want to spend a little time on determining the type of organization needed. And I mean, this will not be a long session in terms of the determination of type. I know you've done some work, but we still want to look at the factors that are involved in determining the type of organization. And then, of course, we have to think a little bit of, well, how is this organization going to be guided if we form it? So if you have a purpose, if you identify membership, and if we determine the type, how are we going to manage it, or how are we going to operate as an organization? And then the final area I want to touch on tonight, and that I will touch on very briefly, just in general terms, is the requirements for registration in the Virgin Islands, or the requirements for a launch. And those are important things to consider when you think of the group process. So all of these should involve the group, as a group, collectively making decisions on these things. And why it's so important to have that type of participation in all areas is because you want to have continuing participation and not a type of organization where people were not involved initially and then they start to have a lot of questions, a lot of gainsaying, naysaying, and then the organization runs into trouble and is an organization that is storming as opposed to an organization that is performing. So we want to avoid some problems in the future. All right, so the first area that I want to touch on is group agreement on purpose, goals, and objectives. So what is group purpose? So group purpose, and this definition is from me. Group purpose is about having a definite statement of what the group desires to achieve, defining the reason for existing. Now, it is important to note that groups originate in response to something, or groups originate because they want to achieve something together. So it's important for the group to have a statement that describes why it exists. So it's also a declaration of where the group wants to be in the future. So yes, there may be some issue that the group is forming on. And we're going to look at some of the results of the scoping in the Virgin Islands to see why you think it may be important to have a group. But it is also important to have a statement that defines or says to the world and affirms to yourselves what is the purpose of the group. So yes, a declaration of where the group wants to be. It is also a statement that results from the ability of the group to think about or plan a future, yes, with some imagination or wisdom. So a group statement involves visioning as well as understanding what is happening now. Yes, so it's, yes, how are we responding to this issue and where do we want to go? Because that is our purpose. We want to deal with this and we want to get there. Yes, and then it also identifies what the problem that you want to address or overcome. And these are things, the group purpose is embedded in the vision and the mission statement that groups eventually articulate. And notice I didn't start with vision and purpose and mission. I started with purpose. Because from purpose, the group can then articulate what its vision is. Because in purpose, there's going to be some visioning. There's going to be a check on reality. There's going to be a check on what you can do, but there's going to be a check on where you want to go as well. Because your purpose is to address an issue, yes? And to take yourself to a level where that issue will not be repeated. So we look at the problem in the group statement, group purpose as well, the statement defining group purpose, yes? But we also allow the group statement to provide a view of what cements the group. What is it that is common in the group that we need to maintain? Yes? And that is usually related either to an issue or to an objective. So that must be clear in the statement. However the statement is articulated, it should provide a view of what causes the group to need to be a group, yes? And how the group proposes to continue being strong as a group in dealing with whatever issues they would like to deal with. So when we think of the group in the VI, we think of the fact that you need to agree on a purpose. And I know there's a lot of motivational messages on the internet that will speak to purpose being a driver of action and success. And I mean, I can say that for groups, this is also an important thing, for a driver for success and a check on reality of why you exist, how are you going to exist, and where are you going as an entity that exists. So I wanted to share those things in terms of group purpose and to identify to you that it is important to articulate purpose. Now, I want to share with you some of the things that I think are relevant in terms of the work that has been done in the Virgin Islands to date from this project that could be relevant for you to consider in attempting to articulate purpose. Yes, so I'm not just saying you need purpose. I'm saying to you, you've done some work already that speaks to those elements that you desire to have in purpose. And it's a matter of putting them in a statement and articulating where you want to be regarding them in the future. Yes. So I want to take the Virgin Islands scoping exercise that was done by CANARI in 2021, thereabouts, where CANARI looked at the strengths and weaknesses in the Virgin Islands and what are the reasons that would drive fisherfolk in the Virgin Islands to want to be a part of a network of fisherfolk organizations. And what I have done here, and I want to make this quite clear, is that I've taken from the survey those things that were relevant more to a network of organizations, because the scoping exercise also looked at primary organizations and understood that a lot of the reasons for joining a primary organizations were not quite the same as the reasons for wanting to join a network of organizations. And this is quite important. So from the scoping exercise, they had 5 main areas of concern in terms of fisherfolk desirous of joining a national network. And I must say, from the scoping exercise and a survey that was done, it is apparent that in the Virgin Islands, the majority of fishers have affirmed that they would like to see a network organization in place. And this is quite a good thing. 60% of the respondents surveyed indicated that they would join a national organization or a network organization. So this is quite important in that from both the survey and the scoping exercise, we have information that suggests to us that you're at a stage where you're ready to form a national organization or a network organization that embraces the fisherfolk in the 4 major islands or all the islands of the BVI, if I may put it like that. Yes, but at minimum the 4 major islands in the Virgin Islands. So from the scoping exercise, there were several main reasons for wanting to join a national organization. Remember, we're still on purpose, yes? So these reasons speak to purpose. In other words, if you're going to join an organization, the purpose must be related to why the individuals or the organizations that are members or potential members would like to join. And this is what we have got from that exercise, yes? So there's the whole idea of togetherness or unity, yes? Togetherness in terms of having one voice, in terms of being supported or represented. Now, the survey didn't use the word represented that much, but the idea of having one voice is about being represented in some activity, in some way, yes? And it embraces the concept of support and unity among fisherfolk in addressing common issues. So it is clear that there are issues that are common to the fisherfolk across the islands that would encourage individual fisherfolk and also fisherfolk leaders of the organizations that are either dormant or existing, as in Virgin Gorda, to want them. There are reasons to want them or to promote their involvement in a network fisherfolk. So togetherness is one of those things. One voice. The support and unity and the issue of community. And I think the issue of community is quite an important issue in that the issue of community speaks to a couple of things. And one of the things the issue of community speaks to is that you have peers that are like-minded that you can draw from, and not just in terms of representation, in terms of representation and in terms of knowledge sharing, practically in terms of fishing activity, in terms of fish marketing, in terms of fish processing, practical things as well. When you have that sense of community, you can draw from your community and you can give to your community. Yes? So this was one of the whole idea of a purpose, one of the things that people are willing to join an organization for, to have that sense of togetherness, to have one voice, to have peer support in a community, fisherfolk communities. And then the other major issue, the other major reason, Nadine, next slide. The other major reason was getting support from the authorities. So getting support from the authorities. Now, this is a critical issue in terms of being able to collaborate on fisheries matters or on matters that affect fisheries, even if they're not direct fisheries matters, through the channels of fisheries management. So I am taking this in the context that getting support from the authorities means not only the department that actively deals with fisheries, the DOAF, but also from the other authorities that in some way impact fisheries. And these may be the tourism sector, maybe some other sectors as well. And why I'm taking that particular slant is because you also have support from the DOF. So clearly support from the authorities means in addition to DOAF, you have other authority areas. So coastal management authority, tourism authority, those kind of authorities as well, in terms of the whole idea of support from the decision makers in those areas. Yes. And then we have, so we have the first reason, the whole idea of unity. The second reason, the whole idea of getting support from the authorities. And then the third reason that came up was being able to participate in fisheries governance. So being able to participate in fisheries governance. So having that ability to have a voice that impacts the way the fisheries in the Virgin Islands is being governed. So having a voice that impacts the way the fisheries in the Virgin Islands is being governed. That is one of the reasons that person said that would, promote their, or encourage them to join a fisherfolk organization or association in the Virgin Islands. And this includes the whole idea of having a bigger say in policy issues, being able to contribute to decisions that would affect and benefit the industry. So before regulations and things like that are enacted, having a discussion and participating in that process and having your participation reflected in the results, effective participation. And then the whole idea of being involved even from the beginning of any process that deals with fisheries governance. And I think these are very valid and quite important purpose, or this, decision encouraging reasons. So the ability to participate in fisheries governance. And then the other reason that persons wanted to, consider participating in a Fisherfolk organization in the VI was dealing with the issues that currently affect fisherfolk. So we looked at the whole idea of governance, we looked at unity, we looked at support, and then there was also the issue of things that affect fisherfolk, having those dealt with. Yes, and they were identified some areas, the whole idea of piracy or theft of traps and hauling of traps. Yes, and then the idea of surveillance and enforcement. So the idea of ensuring that fisherfolk abide by the regulations and that you are not negatively impacted by somebody else's infringement of those fisheries laws or regulations, etc. Yes, and then there was the whole issue of addressing the issues with the marina landing and mooring site at the Virgin Gorda Yacht Harbor. So they were identified some issues that were clearly on the radar of fisherfolk, and these were particularly highlighted as reasons that would encourage people to join a fisherfolk organization in the Virgin Islands. I just want to note that I'm sure there are other issues that may not have been highlighted, but the major point here is that the purpose includes the purpose that somebody would identify with in a fisherfolk organization is a purpose that says we will actively engage in activities to resolve the issues that impact fisherfolk. So if you have an organization had a purpose that included something like that, then quite a few persons who responded to the survey would join based on the fact that, hey, this group is committed to dealing with the issues that impact us negatively. Yes. And then the final reason was the whole idea of being able to pass knowledge to the younger generation. And I was actually quite pleased to see this particular reason in coming out in the scoping exercise. And why I see that is because as organization and as persons engaged in a particular craft or activity or art or science, it is important for continuity to pass knowledge to the next generation. And the idea that a person would be involved in an organization because it involves the concept of succession planning is excellent. So I actually was pleasantly, surprised by the fact that this was one of the reasons that people would find attractive to join a fisherfolk organization. Yes. So this is quite important. And some of the sub-thoughts on this particular area was the idea that we wanted to have a greater understanding of the benefits of a cooperative among younger fisherfolk. And perhaps if we phrase that as the benefits of cooperation among younger fisherfolk, because the concept of a cooperative is about cooperation. Yes. So that is quite an interesting thing. And then the desire to pass on knowledge and experience to the next generation. And this whole idea here, I embody in the concept of succession planning. Not only in terms of your personal business, but in terms of the fisheries industry in the Virgin Islands. So we have 5 major reasons that would promote the membership of somebody taking membership in a fisherfolk organization that is an umbrella organization or a network of organizations. So I took out those because you've already done a lot of work on what the purpose can be in terms of defining purpose and defining a purpose that would be attractive enough to have most of the people in the Virgin Islands who are fisherfolk consider joining an organization. So remember, when we looked at purpose, it's about that thing that causes the group to exist and also causes the group to bind together and collectively address something or collectively go somewhere. So I've looked at purpose in a practical context of what is happening in the Virgin Islands and where you are now in terms of your thinking, in terms of what are the things that would attract you to the concept of having a group that would bring benefit to you, or if not tangible benefit in terms of something material, certainly internal satisfaction, which is also a benefit, because a lot of the things that you've indicated that would promote your joining an organization are not only tangible. They promote tangible achievements, but a lot of them are really just about intangible things that form the basis of being able to succeed at what you do. Yes. For instance, the whole idea of unity is an intangible reality, but it brings tangible benefits. The idea of getting support from the authorities is not something you can put your hand on, but it is something that allows you to bring benefit. So a lot of these things are not about operation in terms of fishing operation, but they are really focused on fisheries governance. Yes. And I want to stay here for a minute before I go to goals and objectives. And why I want to stay here for a minute is I want to ask the group that is here. So I'm going to engage in a little interaction now before we go to goals and objectives. Because, I mean, goals and objectives are an important thing. But first, let us look at purpose, because I want to get from the group that is here. First, I want to get a comment, some response to what I've given to you so far in terms of group purpose. Because we have to start at purpose, or else you don't need a group. If you don't have any purpose, any reason for existing, you don't need a group. Yeah? I mean, that is just reality. Yeah? So what is your response to what I represented so far, particularly in relation to those things that would precipitate the membership being realized? The floor is open. So you can raise your hand or you can unmute your mic and speak, but I really wanted to hear what your thoughts are on those things, because purpose is the most critical issue.
Well, seeing that no one is saying anything yet, well, I fully concur with what you say with the purpose. And based on your analysis from scoping, you're correct. We're trying to do something different. We're trying to make an example. We're trying to make a difference, right? And it's not just for show. It's really, as you said, so that the future generation could fully understand why the organization was put in place. And there are various aspects we could go down the line to describe, but as for fisheries, it's nice to know that we're passing on knowledge to the younger generation. But in the past few years, it's been kind of difficult because remember, from Alma till now, we still recovering, we up and up, but we still recovering certain aspects. We just finally got the school kids so back to regular programming, you know, so for them, it's like they're resetting complete as it. But for us, all reset has to be set aside because we need to be proactive in what we need to do. Because if you look at the economic side of it, we really and truly need to get ourselves organized, because we are at a total disadvantage without knowledge on how to get things done efficiently and done the right way. So yeah, so us in the Virginians, we straightforward, you know. It took us a while to get here. It took us a while, but we straightforward. So we gonna beat around the bush. And Paulson's acts, as you speak about government, is like one of the greatest aspects of this is that we know for ourselves that government now might have to reach out to us, you know, instead of us keep going to government all the time when the governments nowadays barely could help themselves. So it is strength in numbers, united we stand, and we can get things done. So all of this, these goals and objectives make perfect sense. Perfect sense. And Mr. Brody was wondering, so I was telling him just listen, and I showed that he got some insight as to how to formulate his next move practically in registering and what's not. So to make sure that our goals and objectives are set, it helps expedite that matter. So yeah, Mr. Franklin.
Yes. Is there anybody else? So thanks, Ken, but is there anybody else who would like to make any comments as well? Because I do want to hear from you regarding those things that the scoping exercise has brought out. Because I must say to you that from the major reasons that the scoping exercise brought out, a purpose statement is not difficult to get, because all of those things are really based on fisheries governance, and it is not difficult to craft a definitive statement that is all inclusive, that includes the concept of supporting increased economic gains for fisherfolk, simply by dealing with those things in a statement crafted the way fisherfolk would like to have it. So I wanted to be sure in my mind that these are the things that are really critical on the bigger level. So I'm not talking about at the primary level, but I'm talking about at the umbrella level. So I would really love to hear somebody else and their views on that, on what the scoping exercise has brought out. The floor. All right, so we have quite a few quiet people tonight. I don't know how I can shake you because I'm not there physically to come and, stand by you or encourage you, in a nice way. But what I want to do, though, is to find out from you, as a group that is here now, if this is something that you would wish to deal with. Like I said, these sessions are about practical ways to move forward. Yes. And even though I'm not suggesting that we craft a purpose statement now, I'm suggesting that we make a decision to craft a purpose statement and identify how we're going to do that based on the information we have. Is that something that we can do now before I move to goals and objectives? So for that, I would certainly love to have everybody's input. Is it something that based on the scoping results, based on the Fisherfolk's reaction, can we commit to crafting a purpose statement in short order, because we have information, so that we can start the process of looking at goals and objectives? Because even when I go to goals and objectives, they have no meaning unless you have a purpose. They have no meaning unless you have a purpose. Yes, except academics to have information. So is there some commitment that we can look at defining the purpose based on the information we have, not necessarily waiting for new information? So I'm open to responses. Are there any views on that?
I would say yes, that's why we're here.
So, okay, so is that the general consensus? Because, you know, Claudius, what happens is, you know, silence for me is not necessarily assent. Silence could be that you don't want to say no, but that is what you mean. Yeah. So I would really love to hear people say yes. So Chanel.
Yeah, silence could mean that we're not sure no, so you're right.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm. So Chanel is in agreement. The others that are here, tell us what you think, because you don't have to agree, you know. I mean, but at least we'd love to hear why you don't. I hope I'm not intimidating anybody, so I may ask Nadine to ask you the question.
My name is Rondell.
Yes, Rondell.
Yeah, I feel that as a purpose, we all are here to come one unity, one set of fishermen as a group, so that we can see each other problems and help each other according to our problems, and also to find ways of solving those problems.
Excellent. Now, actually, that is precisely what the scoping exercise brought out. And I'm saying to you that if that is what the scoping exercise brought out, and that is what you agree on, then the articulation, in other words, finding the language that expresses your purpose in one sentence, is not exceptionally difficult. And I'm committing the CNFO to helping you to do it. All you have to do is to say that you're making a decision to do that, and we will set a time and date by which we will finish it. So I'm serious about this, you know, because we're here to assist you as much as we can.
Well, I would say yes to that, so I don't need to input any further. Yes.
All right, so can we commit to having a purpose statement? Nadine, what is your timing like? I can do it tomorrow night. No, like I say, I'm about process. Yeah, I can do it tomorrow night, but not this early. So I'm committed to this time for today and Thursday, but unfortunately I have some personal issues that are really critical at the moment. So I can commit to tomorrow night just to do that, just to deal with purpose statement based on the information we have. And for those of you who are willing, we can do it tomorrow night at 8 my time. So if you're willing to do that, we can settle that. And then we move to object goals and objectives, because then we would have made a decision dealing with purpose. We will draft a purpose statement, and then you take it across the board and get agreement on it, because that is the group process. Yes? Leadership leads the way, and everybody inputs into that process. Yes? So can we agree on that, or you have another time? Cool, but we are focused on getting you somewhere practical. Yeah? All right, so while you make up your mind on that, so that is a decision point. Nadine, make a note of that. So at the end of the meeting, we come back to that. We are prepared to work with the Virgin Island Fisherfolk tomorrow night at 8, just to deal with the purpose statement. So that by the time these modules are done, they have a purpose statement that they can start to propagate. Yes? All right. So I'm going to move forward. So in addition to the whole idea of group purpose, a group needs to have goals and objectives. So it's important that after you have a purpose, then based on that purpose, you develop some goals and some objectives. I want to say to you that you develop a vision and a mission as well, but within goals and objectives, they will suffice at this stage to satisfy or promote purpose. Yes? Because we generally say to you that, yes, before you have your articles, etc., we ideally should have a vision and a mission. Yes? But your purpose actually speaks to what your mission should be and generally touches on your vision of where you want to be. Yes? So after you have articulated your purpose, which I'm going to assume is going to be embedded in those concepts of governance, participation, unity, issues, dealing with issues affecting fisherfolk, representation, and succession planning, we want to move to goals and objectives. So what are goals and objectives? A goal is about an end result. It's about what you wish to achieve. So our goal is, in terms of succession planning, is to achieve the state where the next generation is comfortable in the industry before we leave. That's an end goal. Yes? So a goal is about an end result, what you wish to achieve. It is usually long-term and measurable. In other words, it's not necessarily about tomorrow. It's about maybe 5 years from now or 3 years from now. So you say, well, hey, at the end of 5 years, we want to be able to do X, Y. And then a goal can be even longer term than that. You can be saying 20 years, we want to have twice as many fishermen as we have now. I mean, so our goal is usually a long-term, but also a measurable outcome. An objective now is a specific action that goes towards achieving that goal. Yes? So if the goal is in 20 years, we want to have twice as many fishermen, one of the objectives would be to train fishermen over the next 5 years to become efficient fishers, to have effective communication, to encourage people to enter the fishery sector. Those would be objectives. And then those objectives, when actions are placed to achieve those objectives, will work towards achieving the long-term goal of having an increased amount of fishers in the fishery sector. Yes? So an objective is a specific action taken towards achieving a goal. So it's an output of an activity. Yes? And then objectives are more immediate. You know, we want to achieve them now, this year or next year, you know, within a fairly short period of time. Yeah. And they are usually articulated in a way that you have a certain time frame to do them in. So one of the goals that I had for these sessions is for you to develop a purpose statement. And I have set an objective of having that purpose statement done by Wednesday evening. Yes? And the action is to have CNFO to convene a meeting with you based on the information that you have to achieve that objective, in order to satisfy the goal of having a strong organization in the Virgin Islands that can represent fisherfolk, address fisheries issues, participate in fisheries government effectively, and train the next generation. Everybody's following me? Does that make sense in terms of goals and objectives? Quick responses. Yes, no, any questions?
Yeah, fully.
Yes.
So Nadine,
Yes.
can you?
Yes.
Yes, beautiful. Next slide, Nadine. All right. So why should you then develop your group goals and objectives? And I included vision and mission here simply because vision is about a long-term goal. Yes, where you want to be in 15 years or 20 years. And mission is about a short-term objective, about what you want to do now in order to help you get there to that goal. Or, yes? So vision is what? A vision is promotional tools to communicate the purpose of the group. You know, we get back to purpose to all stakeholders and partners. So when you have a mission, like I said, your purpose is embedded in your mission. Yes? It communicates the purpose of the group to all stakeholders and partners. It informs the planning process and it develops those goals and objectives because that purpose is what you use to define your goals and objectives. Notice why I stopped at purpose, because you need that in order to define your goals and objectives. And then your mission now is the basis on which you evaluate how you're getting towards your goal. So when you have your goals and objectives, your mission statements has embedded in it those things that provide a clear and a collective and a central focus. You know what it does? It keeps the group together because it works as the cement that says, this is what we're about, this is where we're going, and this is where we want to be in 20 years. And we don't want to come back, always forward. All right, Nadine. So we look at the whole idea of developing goals and objectives now. Nadine? So Nadine now work with me so fast tonight. Just, I guess she's a bit sleepy. I don't think so. All right, so why should we develop goals and objectives? What are those things that are important to consider when you think about goals and objectives? First, goals and objectives create a roadmap for success. So when you define your goals and objectives, you're defining a pathway to give you some success in what you aim to achieve. Yes? But they also give you a starting point and an end point. So if your goal is to reach a certain place, your goal is from now to there. So it gives you a starting point and an end point. So it's something that you can measure your actions or your level of success against. So when you have a goal and the objectives that seek to satisfy that goal, you can measure where you are in terms of reaching the goal. And you can do something called adaptation in terms of objectives in order to keep on track. Yes? So it says it allows you to see where you're going and to see what changes you need to make and to monitor your success. So these are very critical things to consider. And when you have a goal and the objectives to reach that goal articulated, you can refer to them and you can use them to determine the actions needed to reach the objectives and to satisfy your goal. Yes? So goals are reached one step at a time. Yes, so I mean, you reach a goal now, then you look to get another goal. Yes, because you're always moving forward or you always want to be moving forward. Yes? So when you express yourself in a statement or in the planning process that defines goals and objectives, yes, you provide yourself with a motivation, yes, to say, hey, we're going to go somewhere and we have this anticipation that when we get there, it's going to be beneficial to us. And we're going to bring benefits along the way towards achieving that goal as well. So it motivates you. Yes, or it can motivate you. But goals and objectives also help you determine the priorities and to direct you to focus on what is important. And this is critically important in Fisherfolk organizations in this season. And I say this in the context where I've seen a lot of organizations being co-opted by other organizations who have different goals. And because the Fisherfolk organizations are not primarily focused on their own goals or have not even articulated goals and objectives, then they are sidetracked from the things that cement the group together. And the group becomes weakened because that cement, that purpose that is articulated is not satisfied. So it's important in that sense, yes, to help you to determine priorities and to direct you to focus on those things that are important to the group and directly related to its purpose, yes? And then, of course, goals and objectives make use of your current realities to promote actions that are consistent with where you want to be. So both your mission and your vision. Yes, Nadine? All right, I just wanted to, so we go forward in terms of something, some considerations as to the whole idea of visioning, which is part of the purpose statement, and mission, which is also part of the purpose statement. So your purpose statement, which is embedded in your vision, embeds in your purpose statement, project into the long-term future. It determines your purpose and position as an organization and describe what success looks like. So even though at this point, I'm encouraging you to look at a purpose statement, it's mainly for the purpose of your registration process. And then I will encourage you at some point to focus on a vision statement by itself and a mission statement by itself that allows you to satisfy purpose and project into the long term. So that's why I'm introducing these things here now as well. So the vision projects you into the long-term future. It determines how you operate and what positions you take as an organization. But it also describes what success looks like. Yes? Now, it considers what type of organization you have and the structure of your organization. And it references to your competitors and creates an analogy. In other words, your organization, when it has a vision statement and a mission statement that is clearly articulated, can certainly be put against any other company, and you can see the difference or the similarities because your vision is clearly articulated. Yes? And then importantly, your vision is described as a measurable goal. So at some point, you're going to have an end goal, which is what you want to be in the future. Yes? Based on the type of organization you have. And this is going to be described in your vision. So CNFO's vision is about having fisherfolk that own and govern fishery sector in the region and enjoy a good quality of life. That's our end goal. We want to see fisherfolk who have money, who are financially stable, sound, with good livelihoods, but also involved in the management from an ecosystem-based approach to fisheries resources. So, you know, your vision describes those things. Forward, Nadine. And then the whole idea of a mission. Yes? So your mission is going to be based on your purpose. Yes, and it's going to contribute to you achieving what you visualize yourself to be in the future, and or where you visualize yourself to be in the future. So it's going to be original to you. You're not going to take somebody else's mission, because your mission is about satisfying your purpose and reaching a position that you'd like to be in the future. Yes? And then it must be foundational. In other words, your mission must stay. You know, it must be the basis of how you operate and move forward. Yes? But it also must be able to connect with the persons in the organization. And persons outside the organization must be able to see your mission and appreciate what it does, even if they don't necessarily jump on the wagon, but they must be able to connect with it. Yes, so it must be short and concise. And one of the things that most people recommend is that your mission should fit on a shirt or a blouse. And I'm suggesting to you that in this initial stage, in forming your organization, if you make a purpose statement, have it that it can fit on a shirt or a blouse, so that if there's a promotional activity, you can promote that purpose in order to encourage other fisherfolk to become members. Yes? So those are some of the considerations. Nadine? So goals and objectives. So we have the purpose issue that follows the whole concept of what we vision to be and how we vision to get there in terms of mission. But goals and objectives now are critical in terms of making things happen, and particularly objectives in the short-term sphere, yes, to achieve a goal. So in terms of defining objectives, you look at your purpose statement and you define some outputs that would contribute to you achieving your purpose. Yes? But when you do that, when you define those outputs, those things that you want to happen, then they must be specific. In other words, you're not going to be obscure or ambiguous. In defining an objective, you want to be specific. You want to be able to measure it, to say when it has been achieved, when you've achieved that objective. But you also want to make it practical. It has to be something that you can do. It cannot be something that you're not able to do. Yes? So when you articulate an objective, it must be something you can do. Yes? And it must be relevant, or it must be directly related to your purpose. And then the final thing about the whole idea of making goals and objectives, particularly objectives, is that they should be time-based. In other words, are time-bound. So when you started to look at your objectives, what you want to do, you say, well, what do I want to do this year? What do I want to do next year? And what do I want to do in the next 5 years? So those are time-bound periods. Or what do I want to do next week? Or what do I want to do tomorrow? So you must make it time-bound or time-specific. Yeah, time-specific. All right, Nadine. I also included in this discussion the whole idea of delineation, and that is just a way of saying, how do we define the space in which we work, and not just the physical space, but the space in terms of areas. Because as a group, this should be considered, and it is included in your articles or your bylaws, etc. So delineation is an important issue that you need to look at and to discuss in terms of those things that are required prior to actual registration process. Yes? So I've divided delineation issue into two different areas. And they're both big areas, but I just want you to have an appreciation of what I'm speaking about when I think of delineation issues. So first, when a group decides that it's going to operate or to have some sort of purpose-driven functionality, it is going to do that in the context of some location. So it's going to do that in the context of either where it exists or where it wants to exist. Yes? So for the CNFO, we operate in CARICOM. That is our geographic space, the CARICOM Caribbean community. Yes? So the countries in the Caribbean that are not in the Caribbean community, we don't have membership in those countries. So there is a delineation, a geographic or a geophysical scope of operation. And when you think of group process before registration, that is important to consider. Yes, delineation from a geophysical perspective. So the physical space and the geographical space, which are one and the same in some sense, but yes. Now, one of the points I want to make about delineation is that delineation in terms of activity of an organization, particularly a secondary organization or a tertiary organization, that is an organization that exists above the primary level, is that delineation can consist of different spaces for different purposes or different types of operation. So the CNFO's membership delineation is within CARICOM, but its scope of activity delineation is global. The CNFO operates in the global space. So I just wanted to make that clear, that in delineation issues, you're not limited in terms of layer or scale. So it can be a local scale, a beach level. It can be a country scale or island scale in the terms of Virgin Islands, or it can be a scale in which it encompasses the entire Virgin Islands. And then it can also be a scale in which it includes the region, CARICOM, and the global. So delineation issues must be considered in the context of what you wish to do at each level, or if you wish to stay at one level only. So I wanted to make that very important because delineation issues impact the limits of what we can do where. But more importantly, it also impacts the membership and the relationships that we develop as a group with other entities. So I wanted to really share those with you, delineation issues from a geophysical scope, but also from a social, cultural, economic, and ecological engagement area. So as a group, you're going to engage in governance. That's socio-political, socio-cultural. But as a group, you're also engaged in economic activity as fisherfolk. Yes, that's economical. And then in the governance sphere, you're going to involve the whole idea of nature, ecological considerations, habitats, things like that. Ecosystem-based management of fishery resources is something that you're going to look at some point. And this is about looking at governance structures that take into consideration all of the things in an ecosystem, whether they physical, whether they're living, whether they're non-living, whether they're the medium, whether they're the transient things, all of those things in an ecosystem. So we also have to delineate those areas as well in terms of how we operate. Yes? So all operational matters must be clear. So you're going to say, well, hey, we're going to be involved in fisheries governance as it impacts the operation of fisheries or as it impacts the whole value chain in fisheries, including the consumer. So, you know, the delineation issue is something that clearly requires some consideration when you look at group formation and some process before registration, simply because it impacts what you put in your articles or your bylaws as your guiding principles and your guidance. So I trusted that just one slide on delineation, and this is it. I mean, I trust that that is clear in terms of something that is desirable in group process before the actual registration or formal launch of an organization, because these are questions that are going to come to you immediately after you become a group. Some entity that is outside of the group will ask, well, where do you operate? What areas do you operate in? Things like that. But it also provides the basis from which you can engage with other entities, such as NGOs or other Fisherfolk organizations, or even other sectors and businesses. So this is critically important. In my view, it may not be in the academic literature, but I think it is in the academic literature as well, but not necessarily in the same sense. So I think delineation issues are something that you certainly need to consider before formal registration. And why I'm going through these things like this is because if you cover your bases properly, when the time comes that a potential member asks these questions, you'll be able to say exactly how this is going. Can you hear me? Is everybody still on board? Hello?
Yeah, loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Beautiful. So that is one area that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on in terms of the whole idea of delineation. Yes. All in the context of you know, these things that we need to do before registering or formally launching an organization. So Nadine, we go to the next slide. It's all right. And then one other area, I know I'm giving you a lot tonight, but I think this is quite important. One other area is the whole idea of identity. And identity may be something that you may not have thought of in terms of paying attention to, but identity does a lot of things for a group or an organization. So if you ask any CNFO leader, they'll jump off and tell you exactly CNFO is a network of national fisherfolk organizations in CARICOM. Identity. Yes? So how can I express the concept of identity? So identity refers to the qualities, benefits, personalities, looks, or expressions that make a person or group unique or similar to some other entity. So one can regard the awareness and categorizing of identity as positive or as destructive. Identity is about how a group desires to express itself, as in the face that is presented to others, and about how a group desires other entities to view the group. All right, so, you know, there are quite a few people who are very careful about the image that they project so that you can identify them in a particular way. Yes? So I want to say to you clearly that identity is about the image you want to project. And the image can be either positive or it can be negative. But it's clearly about the image that you would like to project. So that is what identity is about. And I think it's something that you need to consider because it can have no effect, or it can attract, or it can repel others to the organization. So how you identify yourself is important. Yes? So identity is a little different to purpose in that identity describes you, while purpose clearly articulates what you're about, what is affecting you and what you want to do about it. Yes? All right, beautiful. So I think we need to consider the whole idea of establishing identity and articulating that identity in some way. Yes? All right, so after identity, I wanted to just speak a little bit about assisting factors, considering assisting factors that promote group realization of its purpose. So even before registration, some thought can be given to those things that will assist the group, both in the process of registration and in the process of its development as it goes along. And these factors include possible relationships with other groups. So you may find it beneficial to identify the CNFO as an assisting factor, and it's one of a relationship nature, yes? Or you may find that there are resources available to you that you can access, which can help the group to reach its purpose and its objectives, and even help the group in the process of registration. So the whole idea of identifying assisting factors is critical. And then you can find instruments. And when I say instruments, I mean policy structures, I mean legislation, and I mean also action plans or other types of things from in fisheries management or governance that promote your activity, assisting factors as a group. For instance, I can give you an assisting factor that should propel you or encourage you to have a group. One of the assisting factors as an instrument is the Fisheries Act in the Virgin Islands. The Fisheries Act states that two clear things that came out of the Act that I noted quite significantly. The first, the Act allows for fisheries management areas or zones and allow for local fisheries organizations or associations to manage those. So that is an assisting factor. The second assisting factor as an instrument is in the Act as well. And the second assisting factor is that the Fisheries Act allows for the formation of a fisheries advisory group, whether it's advisory committee, however it's phrased. And that committee has nominations from fisher organizations, from a fishing association. And I think the intention of the Act is to have an umbrella organization which then nominates the membership as opposed to primary organizations. So a national organization. I mean, because primary organizations would certainly be at a different level. I mean, and in different realistic practical functionalities. So I'm saying to you that you need to identify assisting factors. And there's some, and then there are other entities that can also help you. I mean, that you may not necessarily have defined relationships with already, but you can approach for assistance because they're there. For instance, in some Caribbean countries, the cooperative department offers training in leadership, in financial management, in several areas that speak to organizational capacity to govern themselves and to operate. So I'm just saying to you that in the Virgin Islands, it would be useful to have a process that identifies assisting factors. Yes, so that you can register effectively and efficiently and also operate and satisfy your purpose with the support of those assisting factors. So I trust that makes some sense to you, yes? As I move to the other areas of type of organization, yes? So we've gone through quite a bit, and because you've opted for shorter sessions, I'm really, condensing a lot of stuff, yes? But to give you a flavor of what we would recommend in terms of your process before registration. And this is not necessarily lengthy, it's just a matter of doing those things, and they don't have to take a long time, yes? All right. So the other part of the process towards group registration or launch is the whole idea of what type of organization do we want to be. Yes, we must identify who we are. Yes. So what type of organization do we want to be? So there are several different types, possible types of organizations. And I'm not talking about non-profit or for-profit yet. Yes. I'm talking about type of organization in terms of its ability or capacity to represent at different levels. So we have primary organizations, which we call primary fisherfolk organizations, PFO, and their membership is mainly individuals. So individual fisherfolk are members of a primary organization generally. But more importantly, primary organizations serve a particular locale, so a local area or a local community would have a primary organization. And then you have secondary organizations, which I would refer to as regional fisherfolk organizations or national fisherfolk organizations. Now, in regional organizations or national fisherfolk organizations, you actually jump up to a different scale where you now operate across several localities or across an entire island or across an entire state. So that is why I've had secondary organization in two different categories. Regional, because within a large country, you can have a network of primary organizations that's a regional organization, and then still have a national organization where the regional organization is a member of that national organization. So secondary organization can either be a regional organization or a national fisherfolk organization. When you move to the scale of a secondary organization, whether it be an inclusive secondary organization or a non-inclusive secondary organization, the membership of the secondary organization is a bit broader, because now the secondary organization can have primary organization as its members, in addition to having individuals and other entities. Now, depending on the type of secondary organizations, it may be exclusive and not inclusive. For instance, a secondary cooperative organization cannot have associations as its members. It would have to change the organization type from a cooperative to something that can include hybrids. In other words, that can include cooperatives, can include associations, can include other types of organizations. So that's why I'm saying to you, a secondary organization, you have to think about it in terms of the type that it's going to be. What type of organization? Or it's going to be inclusive with no limits on membership in terms of being the same type of organization, or it can be a secondary organization that is limited to organizations that are registered in the same way. Yes? All right. And then you can have tertiary organizations. And tertiary organizations now are at a level where their membership can comprise primary fisherfolk organizations, national fisherfolk organizations, regional fisherfolk organizations, individuals, or other entities. So a tertiary organization normally operates at a much wider scale than a secondary organization. And a secondary organization operates at a much wider scale than a primary fisherfolk organization. But the implications are that the membership is also broader as the organization moves up in scale. So the consideration on the type of organization is an important consideration. And based on the scoping exercise, the fit, in my view, is a secondary organization, which is either regional or national fisherfolk organization, where you have members that are from primary organizations from the different islands, or an amalgamation of organization in the islands. a tertiary organization now operates on a much wider scale. For instance, CNFO is a tertiary organization which has national organization in its membership. Yes. So I'm just saying to you that we need to determine the type of organization. Now, I want to say that based on what I've read from your scoping report and the mission that came, so the focus group meetings that what took place on the different islands, it is clear that you want to look at a secondary organization, an umbrella organization that encompasses organizations from the 4 islands and the other islands, if there are any fishes on them, into one body within the Virgin Islands. So you're staying in the Virgin Islands. That is what I've gotten. And I mean, you can make a decision on that tonight in terms of recommendation if you're uncomfortable making a decision with the members we have here. But certainly, we need to certainly define the type of organization. Yes? All right. So that is also an actionable point, Nadine, if we have any time. And then how will the organization be guided? We don't have a lot longer to go, but certainly I want to at least look at some of the practical things that need to be considered before formal launch or registration, because these things are what will actually hold you to a particular way of operating. And I must say to you that when an organization has internal bylaws and a constitution that guides it, even if it's an informal organization, as long as it has a process to clearly articulate membership, those things can be enforced by law. I want to repeat that. So if an organization has internal policy structure, whether it's registered legally or not, and it operates in the public space, that guiding document can be used in a court of law to hold the organization responsible. So it's important to consider this when you look at your organization, to consider what will guide your organization. So your organization needs a policy structure. And when I say policy structure, I actually mean a policy structure that may be external, that the organization is based on, and an internal policy structure that determines how the organization will operate. I'm going to give you an example. So if you look in CNFO's Article of Association, I think we actually have as a foundational policy structure the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries as one of the guiding policy structures for our organization's operation. And then the CNFO has internal policy structures that speak to how the CNFO does work as an organization internally, in terms of selecting membership for meetings, in terms of the process of relationships, quite a few things. CNFO culture and norms are articulated in a policy document for CNFO, which is internal, even though CNFO is also saying that we're based on international policy structures as well. So this is important for the organization to consider what sort of a policy structure will guide you as an organization. And if you have to articulate or build a policy structure, then you build one for your organization. Because each organization should have its own internal policy processes that are unique to the organization, that makes the organization unique and successful, that is based on the culture in which the organization operates. For instance, CNFO in its internal policy has a particular way of doing things. And we have gotten quite a lot of negative feedback from one of our project partners in the past, because CNFO insisted that we must do things by our policy if we're doing it. We're not infringing on somebody else's way of doing things, but we're certainly not going to allow another company to come and cause us to change our policy to suit them, when our policy is based on the culture and the internal dynamics that run our organization. But if you don't have that, then you cannot fall back on that, and other organizations can actually overrun you. I mean, these are practical things, you know. We have lived in this area, yes. So the organization needs to be guided, both internally and as how it operates internally and how it operates in relation to the world in which it operates, so external operation. And then the organization must be guided by some legal structure. And that legal structure is your constitution and bylaws, yes? Because that legal structure deals with internal governance issues, how the organization is going to be run. But it also deals with external legal obligations as an organization. And I'm saying this to you to make you understand clearly that when you have an organization operating in the public space, legal or informal, that organization has external legal obligations. So those have to be clearly accounted for in terms of the way the organization is guided. So for instance, CNFO must return some information to the register of companies in Belize on an annual basis in order for the CNFO to satisfy its obligations. And therefore, we ensure that we carry the process through to make those things happen. So we have an annual audit. We have audited reports. We also have to hand in annually our board structure and membership. And I'm not sure if it's annually, but every so often we have to send in the names and the signature. So these are important things that needs to be considered when you start to look at, you know, the organization. And then, of course, all of these things culminate in the making up of the constitution and the bylaws of the organization. Yes, and the constitution and bylaws look to satisfy the internal governance issues, to satisfy the legal obligations, and to provide overall guidance for all of the operations of the organization, including administrative operations. Yes, but your constitution and bylaws must be consistent with the national law of the country. So you cannot have in your constitution something that breaches an existing national law. Yes, it doesn't normally happen, but it's possible. But if that does happen, then your constitution will not be accepted in legal process. Yes, so it must be consistent with existing national and legal policy and law. Yes, so those are some of the things that are critical to understand and to deal with. Now, in terms of looking at the constitution and bylaws, the CNFO can assist in terms of actually helping you to develop these, and the CNFO can share with you the way it has handled the whole idea of policy, internal and external. And of course, the CNFO is a legally registered company, so those things we have you know, some experience in. But in addition to that, I think that you would benefit significantly from interaction at the local level in the Virgin Islands with companies that are similar to the ones that you want to make, yes, that you want to have, yes. So my final slide is going to look at the actual process to register and what is involved. Yes? All right, beautiful. So after you've looked at your purpose, you've identified the whole idea of your goals, objectives, things like that. You have agreement on, you know, where you're going to operate, what areas you're going to operate in. You have sorted out what relationships you want to work with and what would assist you and things like that. And you've determined the type of organization that you want to be. Yes? Then you're practically in a position where if you have these things articulated properly, you have all the documents required to register your organization formally. And you have the basis to register in any way, whether it's non-profit, for-profit, or whether it's just a charitable organization. You have the basis because you have all those things that are required by law, or you have the foundation information to get them. Yes? So the final step would be just preparing what is required by the process by which you're going to register. So you have to be clear and specific in terms of your guiding articles and your constitution. And when I say clear and specific, I mean that if you're going to have a General Assembly once a year, then that has to be clear. What is going to be, who has to be present, how it's going to be guided, things like that. Yes? So you need to prepare those documents and articles that are required by whichever entity you're going to register with. So if you're going to register with the tourism department or social services department or something like that as a non-profit community-based organization, they have a requirement in terms of the registration process. But you would have, if you look at all those previous things that we've discussed, you would have the information necessary to develop those things. You will need to go back to the drawing board. I hope you're following me. Yes? And then you just deal with the registration process. And the registration process must be consistent with the type of registration. So if it's a non-for-profit company, it can be registered in a couple of different ways, I assume. It can be a non-profit company, or it can be a non-profit association, or it can be probably a community-based organization, and they may have different ways of registration. And I'm not really that familiar with the specific legal structure and requirement, and I think Melanie can assist you there. I think the DOAF may be able to commit to guiding you in that particular way. But the point I want to make is whether you have a formal or informal organization, you must prepare the things that are required based on the previous set of things that we've discussed. So I want to end there for tonight. And I'm open to any questions or any comments, any other type of contribution. I'm going to hand over to Nadine because I've really done a lot of talking with a lot of speed, but I hope that you've gotten something from tonight. Nadine, it's yours.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Mitch brought up, I noted, Mitch, the opportunity you offered for us to meet tomorrow night. So if we can agree on that, and then what the purpose of that is to develop a purpose statement. And then maybe we could look at defining the type of organization, which shouldn't be that difficult. You spoke about secondary based on some of the information gathered already. And maybe identity shouldn't be difficult. So maybe those 3 bullets can be considered as a starting point for you to have movement towards launching the NFO or the organization, the Fisherfolk Organization in the Virgin Islands. And Mitch also offered some assistance that we are willing to help with creating your bylaws, and you can start with existing Fisherfolk Organization constitution and bylaws already in the VI. So I think that's the end of it. Oh yes, I was looking at the notes. That's so I don't know if we can agree now that we meet so that we can prepare for that meeting tomorrow night, and it's going to be later, 8:00 p.m. in Antigua, which should be your 8 o'clock as well. So we have 10 people. That's what I saw when we started, but I think more persons were here. It went up to 14. So you can unmute. I will stop the recording now. Thank you for the attention, and we look forward to seeing you again on the CNFO Leadership Institute.